Yes, and I believe we are now live on YouTube with this first Azure Meetup for the Danish Azure user group here after summer. And welcome to Aleksandar, who's joining us live from home in Serbia, right?
Yes.
I assume that's where you're at right now.
Yes, I'm
No
home.
traveling. No traveling.
No traveling. I landed
Perfect.
in March.
Yes, exactly. Me as well.
Yeah.
Let me see. I should share my screen as well, so I can share these. Let me see if I can do that. So if we just share, so I just wanted to briefly mention the upcoming meetups that we have before we get started with Aleksandar. So just to give a heads up on some of the other Cloud Secrets to Go online meetups that we have coming up. The next one is August 25th with Rick, who's going to talk about cloud migration, and he has some interesting stories, I believe, to share. And stop with that one, and then share another one. This one, which is Glenn, who is going to talk about digital twin, which I know nothing about. So I'll probably join that one. But we'll see. Some interesting meetups for sure, and then we have a lot more coming up that we will adding to our meetup group in the near future. But enough about upcoming meetups. Right now, it's about Azure Resource Graph, which Aleksandar will talk about and share some more about. So I don't know if you want to introduce yourself first. So I mean, you've been to Denmark and Copenhagen a number of times before, so I'm sure
Yes.
a lot of people already know you. But for those that haven't met you, which is probably very few,
Yep.
if you can.
So my name is Aleksandar Nikolic. I'm Azure and Cloud Data Center Management MVP. I'm a freelance trainer delivering PowerShell and Azure trainings around the world. I'm one of the co-founders of PowerShellMagazine.com that I'm running with a couple of other MVPs. And that's it. So I think I can share my presentation. And something strange happened for a moment. So it's kind of funny because I'm monitoring on another laptop and I cannot see my presentation there.
No, so there's on YouTube. Okay. There's a slight delay because we are
slight delay. Okay.
Yeah, so we are actually in the future, and YouTube is a couple of seconds in the past.
Couple of seconds. Okay.
Yeah.
No problem. So welcome to Exploring Azure with Resource Graph session. As I said, my name is Aleksandar Nikolic. I will not repeat all the stuff here, but this is a nice chance to see the figurine that my wife made for me. So what do we want to do? There are a couple of things that are very useful when you want to govern your Azure resources. So we want to gain insights so that we can effectively govern our resources. And we want to do that quickly and efficiently. Another thing that now is getting more and more important is we want to query that at scale, because lots of people are now having a bunch of different subscriptions. They have thousands of resources. So if you cannot get quickly information from all of those, then you have a problem. Another thing is that we want to have access to all of our subscriptions, not just one of them. So that's another thing that it's important. And very often we want to track changes that are made to the resource properties. You would like to have some kind of a snapshot in time and then to compare the new state a little bit later. So to do all that, Microsoft created a service called Azure Resource Graph. So you might already be a user of Azure Resource Graph without even knowing it. So if you use Azure Portal search bar, you use Azure Resource Graph. If you ever tried the new browse all resources experience, you also under the hood used Azure Resource Graph. In Azure Policy, the change history, which is still in preview, is also based on a resource graph. So even if you are not being aware of the resource graph as a service, just being in a portal and using those other services, you are leveraging the Azure Resource Graph. That's one of the reasons why actually the portal is quite faster today than it used to be. So how does Azure Resource Graph work? Azure Resource Graph is based on a Resource Graph query language, and the query language is based again on a Custo query language, the language that we use today with Azure Monitor, Log Analytics, with Azure Sentinel, Azure Workbooks. There are so many different services that are using the Custo, and Resource Graph query language is a subset of that. So all the data that Resource Graph can reach is in a database, and that database contains a couple of tables. They start with a 4, I think, and at the moment they have 7. So first they have a advisor resources for data and resources from Azure Advisor. Then they have alerts management. The latest one that was added is Azure Health. Then we have maintenance resources, resource containers. They contain information about the subscriptions and the resource groups. And the biggest table, resources, that contains all resources supported by Resource Graph. You will not find everything there because they're just kind of improving things and adding new stuff. And then we have a security resources table with resources from Azure Security Service. So how can we actually use Azure Resource Graph? The easiest way, and how usually people start, is they use Resource Graph Explorer in Azure Portal. The good thing is that the interface is quite nice. We will do some demo there, and once when you are happy with the results, you can pin them as dynamic charts and add them to your real-time dashboards. So you can create a bunch of different dashboards that are based on the Resource Graph results, and you can keep them for yourself, just being available to you in a portal, but you can also share them with your coworkers. If you prefer to work with Azure PowerShell, then you need to install AZ Resource Graph module. That module is still not part of the Azure PowerShell AZ modules. You can think about it as a preview still. I think that the latest version is 0.7.7. But once when they reach the GA with the module, it will be included with other AZ PowerShell modules. If you prefer to work with Azure CLI, then you need to add a resource-graph extension to your Azure CLI, and then you will have AZ graph in the AZ shared graph commands available to you. The good thing is that the query that you will write is structured in the same way for each language. And you can also use a REST API if you prefer, or some other SDKs like Go and Python. And if you go to Azure Resource Graph documentation, you will see a couple of quick start documents for supporting the other SDKs that Microsoft is supporting for working with Azure. When we write queries, we can save them as a private or a shared queries. If you save your query as a private one, it will be available only to you, and it will, in a way, live in the portal. But if you save your query as a shared query, the shared queries are actually Azure Resource Manager objects, and they will go into a resource group and become the resources with a resource type. And you can actually write a query to get your shared queries. And I will show you that because that's quite useful, actually, when you want to access them from a command line. So let's move to a demo to see how things are working there. And we will start here with Home and go to a Resource Graph Explorer. So when we are in the Resource Graph Explorer, as you can see, here we have the schema with tables, and tables then contain information about the resource types, and then we have access to the to the properties that we can use. And right now we have 7 tables. You can create a new query, open existing one, then run, get the results here, save. As you can see, the interface is quite good. So let me write one query just to show you how that looks like. The goal for this query will be to get the recommendations from the Azure Advisor service, and then to see what are the solutions they're offering for one specific virtual machine that I have. So when you want to start, you will just click on the title of your table, and it will be put in a query. Then you can go like this and look at the types. So here we have this type, and immediately it says, okay, piping that to where the type is equal to Microsoft Advisor recommendations type. Be aware that if you use a equal sign, that means that it will be case sensitive. If you want to avoid that, then use equal sign and a tilde. So now that we have that, we need to get to the impacted field, which will be a resource type for a virtual.
Oh, it looks like Alexander's stream froze a bit here. So let me just check with him if he is online or if his computer is busy spinning up an Azure Resource Graph query. Just hang on 1 sec. Okay, he will try to rejoin. Sorry about that. It's always a reboot. So unfortunately, I can't juggle or anything while we wait for Alexander. But I'm sure he'll be with us shortly as his laptop boots up. So let me see if I can find some background music or something to play meanwhile. Okay, so just while we wait for Aleksandar's laptop to boot, I can just share in terms of the user group that we are looking into new meetups coming up here in September. We're scheduling some new ones, and if any of you who are watching has ideas for meetups or topics that you would like to hear more about, then please feel free to reach out. Either post some suggestions here in the comments or reach out to us via meetup.com or Twitter. We're always happy to hear your suggestions about topics that you'd like to see, or if there's something that you yourself want to present. We're happy to help out in any way we can, whether it's helping with reviewing a presentation, if it's your first time presenting, or just giving you some guidance on possible topic and what a talk could contain, or help review it if you want input on it. Then we're always happy to help with anything, and also just finding a date that suits you if you want to present something yourself. So just to let you know that we are always very happy to have new presenters come on and share whatever topic they have related to Azure. So while we wait for Aleksandar to join again, when his laptop is done upgrading, yeah, then we can just have a look at the upcoming meetups. I share again if any of you missed it in the beginning. So let me just see here and share this one. The next one that's coming up is with Rick Hemsworth from the UK, who's going to talk about cloud migrations, some of the stuff that he's encountered working as a consultant, working with large customers and getting them moved to Azure, and the journeys that he's been on in doing that. And then another one, which unfortunately I don't know too much about, so I will definitely be joining this one to learn more. Glenn will talk about digital twin, Azure digital twin, which is fairly new to me, maybe because I don't work so much with IoT. But yeah, so I won't try and explain what it is because I don't actually know. But this meetup is scheduled for September 3rd. So if you want to learn more about Azure Digital Twin, like me, then you can join us on September 3rd. All right, let's see how far along. Aleksandar, it looks like you're back.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Well, at least you're back, and you have a fresh new Windows install.
Yeah.
Or update.
Yeah, but I will tell you what happened when you put me live.
Yeah, well, you are live now. So if you want to, so if you want to share your screen, then let me just remove this banner because now you're actually here. So if you want to share your screen, then I can add that to the stream.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So what happened is that my machine blue screened, and because I had it scheduled restart for Sunday, actually when it started booting again, it went to the updating process. So I hope it will not blue screen again, because it happened a couple of times a couple of days ago, but I tested this laptop for the last 2 days and it worked 24 hours without a problem. So I thought that there is no issues anymore. I'm sorry for that. Okay, so I was here trying to get recommendations from a certain machine. So when you click on the types, you go here and you will need to find the impacted field. When you click on it, this is what you will get. And you need to go here with the type of your for your virtual machines, which is a Microsoft compute / virtual machines. And then impacted value will be the name of my machine. So you need to be careful with casing if you use equal, but I got this right, I hope. So as you can see, I got a couple of results back. So I can pick one of them, go to see the details, and here I will get that properties dot short description dot solution will give me the name of a solutions. So now that I know that, I can get back to my query. Say project, which is similar to select object in the PowerShell. Properties, short description, and then solution. If I run the query again, you see now that I have only the names for those solutions. So once when you are happy with the query, you can save it and make it private or public. I will show you now a couple of queries that I have. So I have one private, disk by SKUs. And then if I click on it, you can see the code of my query. If I go here and pick some shared ones, you can see that you can pick different subscriptions. I only have one subscription accessible to this account, so it's only one of them. Also, you can get from different resource group, but I put all my shared queries in one resource group. And then there is a bunch of queries here. So for example, this one is interesting and very usable for other things, not just for resource graph. It will give you a combination of a type and the API versions that are used in a resource graph. Usually they use the latest stable API version. So if you run that, you get 37 pairs of the types and the API versions that you know that you can later use in your REST API calls or maybe in ARM templates or whatever. So this is one of the questions that people usually need to go to reference documentation to find out. But now we have a query that we can use to get that information as well. Once when you are happy with things and results, you can pick them to a dashboard and build your dashboard with the different tiles there and different visualization of results. So let me show you what I have already. This is my Azure inventory dashboard. So it combines some of the markdown with some of the results of queries. So here I get the count of all my Azure resources, then top 10 counts by type. I have a section for a compute inventory with how many machines I have, then by operating system, how many Windows and Linux, storage accounts. This is interesting, disk by disk state. So you see that I have a couple of those that are already attached. Those VMs are live, and I have some reserved for machines that are deallocated. But if you find here unattached disk, that's the disk that you are not using, you're just paying for it. So you will know that you need to remove that one, okay? Some of all disk sizes, networking, SQL, and app service. So this is very, very useful. Another thing that it's really kind of cool is that that data is live and in real time. So all the changes will be visible as well, especially if you turn on the auto refresh. If you click in one of those tiles, you will be put again in something that looks like a Resource Graph Explorer, although it's not fully Resource Graph Explorer. to get the full access to it, you need to click on View in Resource Graph, and then you can continue to work here as well. So this is how we will work in Azure Portal with Resource Graph queries. It's quite useful to have that access to tables and the resource types and properties and all of that. But you might like to automate as well. And if you do that, then you will probably go and use Azure PowerShell or Azure CLI. So the first thing is that for Azure PowerShell, you need to install a module called AZ Resource Graph. For Azure CLI, you need to install extension resource-graph. Once when you have that, you can start exploring what's available. AZ Resource Graph module contains only one commandlet, search AZ graph, and one of the parameters is obviously query. You can use the query in one line, as are here in this demo.
Uh-oh. Did we lose him again? He seems frozen, so I'm afraid that he's blue screening again. We'll see. 1 sec. See if he comes back. Otherwise, we might need to reschedule until his laptop is fully cleaned and up to date. Okay, it blue screen again. Let's see if he's able to come back online. Otherwise, I think we might reschedule. We'll see how long it takes for him to come back. So if you please hold. I'm sorry that this is happening again. Hopefully we can come back fairly soon. Yes, are you back, Aleksandar? What is going on?
I don't know, Guy. Seriously.
Is your laptop gone traveling already?
It looks like this is ridiculous.
Okay, let's give it one more shot and then we'll see.
Yeah, if it reboots again, then sorry. I don't want to bother you anymore. Yeah, sorry.
No, we'll see. I'll add your screen to the stream, and then we'll see if we can continue, and then we'll take it from there. If it blue screens again, then we'll reschedule. But let's see if it doesn't work.
Reschedule. Okay.
All right, I'm adding your screen now, so we should see that now.
Okay. Okay.
There we go. Go ahead.
Okay, so I hope you can see the screen again. Machine blue screen again. I mean, but this time I didn't need to wait for update. So I was back quickly, but if it blue screens again, we will need to reschedule. Sorry for that. I will need to change and deliver session from a different laptop if this one is not reliable. Sorry for it. So when I was, I talk about the search AZ graph and how you can format your queries in one line, but you can also use a here string and have it in multi-line. You will see that a little bit later. So when you want to go through all these things and to explore, probably the first query that you will write will be resources, the main table with all the resources, and then you will try to find how many of them you have in your subscription. I have access to only one subscription, so I have here as a result only resources from that subscription. If my account had access to more than one, I will have here the number that represents the resources in all of them. Okay, so let's explore now virtual machines. So the first query here will be to give me information about how many VMs I have, and the number is 29. If I want to get to information about just one machine, then I will use an AND statement, specify the name for that machine, and then I will get all the properties of that machine. Because we are in the PowerShell, let's type that to a get member to see what kind of object we got back. And you will see that the object is a custom object. So our JSON is turned into a custom object. And if you want to get a JSON representative of your resource, then you need to pipe to convert to JSON and set the depth to, let's say, 100. By default is 2, and with 2 you will not get all the information. So here in this one, I will actually expand the properties, because if you see here, properties have a lot of information, and I will store that in a properties variable. So if I run that and store it in a properties variable, and then we can kind of investigate and see that in the properties we have some property subproperties: storage profile, OS disk, and OS type that contains information. Is it a Windows or a Linux? So in case that you want to build your query to give you information about how many Windows and Linux machines you have, you will need to do the summarization count by OS type. And if I do that, you see that I get a table that contains information about how many Windows and Linux boxes I have. Here I don't like the names of the columns, so I would like to change them. And I can do that piping to project OS equals property storage OS type, and total will be replacement for count underscore. So if I run this, you see that I finally have OS as a column and total, and then operating systems and the numbers. So this is how you investigate, how you explore and get information about things. So I have here a bunch of different examples. So this one is interesting to give you information about unassigned public IP addresses, which will be kind of a bad. You have something, but you are not using it. You're just paying for it. I don't have any, which is good. Then it's possible to get information, for example, about the VM sizes that you use with your virtual machines. So here you can see that very easily, very quickly, you get that information. I will not get into lots of details about how you get through all this, but usually you will investigate that just piping to get member and investigating the properties and the sub-properties, and then you will find out how to do it. This is all kind of a goes into a simpler Azure Resource Graph queries that can be much more complicated. And to show you that, here is an example how to explore virtual machines to find the public IP addresses. And just to show you here, one of the approaches is to get first information about all the NICs. You can store that to a variable. Then you will get information about all the related public IP addresses and store that into IP as variable. And then when you have that, you will then go and finally get the IP address. So as you can see here, I'm using variables twice as some kind of intermediate storage. That works, but it's even better if you can do everything in a query. And to do that, you need to join tables. So here in this query that looks quite complex, right? We have two join statements. So first we get information from the resources about virtual machines and their network interfaces. What's important to get at the end is that we are renaming nic.id to nic.id. This will be the name of the matching property. The kind of the join that we will do is left outer, which means that we will take all the properties in a left table and then get the matching from the right table. And the right table will be, again, resources for network interfaces types. Matching property is, as you can see, nic.id. Because we have nic.id in both tables, the one in the right one will be renamed to nic.id1. And this is why we need to use project away to remove that from result. So once when we do that, we have information about all the NIC IDs and public IP IDs. And now we need to join that to public IP addresses using the public IP ID as a connector. And then from there, just to get the public IP addresses. So if I run this selection, and then run a query, I can get a where, and then just public, you will get the public IP addresses. Okay. So it's a little bit more time to get to this kind of a query, but once when you have it, you can easily save it and reuse it later. Here is one of the things that I'm really happy with, that I came up with a way to use the shared queries from the command line. And the interesting thing is that if you have a shared queries, they're Azure Resource Manager types. Their type is Microsoft.resourcegraph/queries. And I thought, like, okay, if they exist, they also contain the query code. So if I can get just the reference to their name, fetch the code, and then run the code, I don't need to go to a portal to run it. So this is what I did. I'm here mixing a little bit of Azure CLI just to show you how that works. And with Azure CLI, I will now get the list of all the shared resource graph queries that I have. And with query 1, as you can see, I have created a query called shared resource graph queries that actually returns the information about them. I need to join just to show you now the code of that query. So resources where type equals Microsoft Resource Graph Queries, project name, time modified, and then the query itself. So now that I have that, I can use it here with a PowerShell and get the list, or use it with a AZ graph. So now that I had that, I thought to say, okay, it's now kind of a good time to create a small function, get shared query, that accepts the query name as the input. And once when it has, then inside of it, you use a search AZ graph to get that query. okay? And once when you have it, then you will be able to use that as input for a search AZ graph for any kind of your shared queries. So let me define this function. So to be fully functional, because I want to work with the names, I will create an argument completer that will fetch the name of my shared queries. And because Azure Resource Graph is fast, this will also work very fast. So to do that, I need to use the register argument completer commandlet, targeting get shared query, my function, the query name, the parameter, and what will be passed to the parameter is the result of this script block. Search AZ graph, and just return the names. So let's run this. Register. So now that I registered, I can go with a get shared query. Okay, let me try first. So this is how it will work if it's just typed already. But if you want to see it how it works, then you say get shared query minus query name, and then you press tab, and it starts bringing the names of your shared queries. Pay attention here that because they have spaces, I also managed to wrap them in a single quotes. So as you can see here, just go through all of them. Oh, I can save that to out variable query1. Query1 variable will now contain the code of my query that I can actually use with search AZ graph query1. And I need to wrap this. And it gives me results about all the locations that are, all the resources that I have in certain locations and how they are distributed. So this is something that you can add to your profile script, and then it will be available to you every time when you want to use search AZ graph, which is kind of a cool thing. Before I move to changes and all that, I want to show you create shared query code here. The Azure CLI team created a new version of Resource Graph extension that now supports the shared query commandlet. It's still experimental when you actually, let me see, when you move to my Windows subsystem for Linux. Okay, and if I go with the AZ graph, mistyped. Graph. Then, as you can see, the shared query is still experimental, but it allows you to work with the shared queries from Azure CLI as well. Kind of a similar to what I did, but I think it's easier with my solution because you can refer to names, and here they need to work with the so-called shared query URI, which is actually the ID for the shared query. Okay, so It's still in preview. They might improve it, but this is what we have right now. I also, because I like to work in Visual Studio Code, and I thought what would be really cool is that if I have a textual file, I just called it Custo here because it gives me a little bit of a syntax highlighting with some Custo related extensions, is that if I have a bunch of Azure Resource Graph queries in a file, wouldn't it be cool if I can just select them and run them and get results? So to do that, I created a task for my workspace when I'm working. So let me show you first how it works. You just select the query that you want to run. You can right-click, or you can assign the keyboard shortcut, run a task. I also created a way to run without passing any inputs, or specifying how many resources I want back. So for example, for this one, it doesn't make sense to pick anything, so I will go with this one. And the resource graph query will give me results. If I want to work with this one, select, right-click, or Ctrl-Shift-P or F1, run task. I will go with the input. And for input, I will select, okay, give me only 5 storage accounts. When I run it, give only 5. Isn't this cool? So you can create a file that contains network-related resource graph queries, and one for virtual machines, for storage, for service apps, for whatever you want. You just organize them nicely. You add some comments above to explain what they do. Then just select them, couple of clicks, and you get a result. Just to show you how it works, this is a task JSON. I have customized it to change to a dark theme when I'm in a JSON file. So here what you can see is that I first defined for all 3 supported operating systems the executable for Windows, for Linux, because different paths, different parameters. And then you will go to tasks. I have 2 tasks, one with input and one without. One without is a little bit easier. So if you want, you can go directly and in a command specify the search AZ graph query. The hardest part is escaping the double quotes. So you need to use 3 backslashes here, and that's the easiest way. Or if you want to extend the functionality a little, you can actually create a module and put some functions in a module, put some post-processing or whatever you want. And then your command will look like this. You will first import a module, and then you will run a query from it. So for now, my module is very simple. It contains a simple function, AZ graph, that it's just a wrapper around the search AZ graph, nothing more than that. But this allows me to kind of improve it, to make it more complex, to extend it, and add some other stuff. So I think that's kind of a pretty cool thing. I worked on it a couple of days ago, and I was really happy. The hardest problem was actually the escaping part for the double quotes. Another thing that is quite useful, I will get back to the SDK here in the PowerShell, here is how you can share your resource graph query with a link. So you might say, like, why is that important? But you can put that link into your document. You can share that link with your colleague. So how to do that? The base URI is this. So this part is maybe strange to you, but this feature custom portal false is created so that people from Microsoft, when they click on those links, they always use the public portal, not some of the internal ones. That's the reason why it's there. It works without it, but it's better if it's there. And actually, when you go to Azure Resource Graph documentation and you go to their examples and you go to examples for a portal, all those links there in a portal, if you right click and copy link, will practically be this, and then the content of the query itself. So this is the base URI, and then I will have a query using a here string to get information about the type and the API version. So let me run both of those. What you need to do is you need to escape that those characters that the URI doesn't like. Okay, so for that we have a type called URI, and has a static method called escape URI string. We pass the string that is concatenated URI string and the query string to that one. If I do that, this is how it looks like. This is what we had, and then after query here, we have those resources, and then you have those strange characters that are actually representing spaces and some other characters that we need to escape. Once when you have that, you can just run start process and open. So if I just run this, did I run this? Yeah. Usually it starts here. For some reason it didn't. But let me just click on this. As you can see, the portal is open exactly at the Resource Graph Explorer blade, and the code of my query is loaded. So I can now just run it or decide to save it. And you can share this link in your documentation. You can share this link with your colleagues, and every time when they click on it, their Resource Graph blade will be open with that code inside. That's pretty handy. Okay, one more thing that people say the Resource Graph is good for is to track changes, to find the changes. Right now, it's not supported with commands, so we need to use the Resource Graph SDK, and I will use this with a PowerShell. So we need to build a body, and for that one, I have here a JSON put in here string that I need to define the resource ID. As you can see, that will be my LoneCL1 virtual machine. And then you define the start and end time. The period that the Azure Resource Graph is tracking is 14 days. Okay, so once when you have that, the other things that you need to do is you need to authenticate. And to authenticate, you need access token. So access token can be fetched from the AZ context. Let me just get back here. AZ context. And then with a little bit of .NET magic, I will get results. So here the result variable contains the access token property with my access token. And I will use a splatting to build the parameters and parameter values for invoke REST method. So method will be post. The URI is this one for resource changes. I will pass the body that I created before. In headers, I need to define authorization with the bearer and the access token, and the content type is JSON. So this is my hash table, and something is not right. Request payload is missing. Let me see. As they say, it worked before during testing. So let's define body. Let me just check if here everything is right. Yes, it is. Then let's define this again and run this. I don't know why it didn't work. So now if I look at the properties changes, what you can see here is this kind of output. So before snapshot, after snapshot, some property changes with the tags for events that happened. So it's a little bit better if we go to actually property changes. And if we run that, this is what you will see. No? So this is what happened in the last 7 days. So I practically changed one of the tags. It was a tag event, ShareGate deploy. I changed that to easy user group Denmark. There was some booting of machine as well. See, those are the changes that happen. So this is really useful. As I said, it's not a very kind of easy user friendly right now, because I hope that they will create some commands for it. But in the meantime, this is the way to go to use the SDK to get it. Okay. So that will be all that I prepared for you. Sorry for problems with the blue screen and all of that. Thank you for being patient. And let's see, are there any questions?
Yes, so there are a few. So Matthias asked about the examples and whether they'll be available afterwards. It seems like you have a lot of material that could be very valuable to look into.
Yeah, sure. I will put it on a GitHub or share it somewhere else, and then I will share a link with you, and you can share it in a Meetup. Is it okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, and Matthias, Robel was also right that start and it didn't work because what happened here is that I was in a task instead of the PowerShell. So if I was here, then this command will actually no, something I changed something in the process, but this will work if the PowerShell was here instead of task. That's right.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah. So we had Abhishek who asked about saving. So there was 2 comments, but it was about saving the result from your query to a database. Whether that's something that's possible. I saw in the portal that you could download it as a CSV file.
Yes.
So he's asking about saving it to a database.
I haven't tried it myself, but that's possible, especially because that will make it easier for you to compare the changes. Because right now the service itself support only for 14 days. But if you want it for a longer period of time, then you need to save all the intermediate results. So you can automate that and then store it in a database, and then later compare the database and get the full tracking of all the changes on certain properties of your resources. That's possible.
Yeah, and that's something you can do directly from PowerShell as well. Save it to the database, or would you then download the result as CSV?
I'm pretty sure that's possible with the PowerShell. I haven't tried it myself, but once when you have results, when you have a data, when you have that CSV, then you can manipulate that to your liking and store it wherever you want to, really, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks. And then, so yeah, Matthias says he has multiple questions, so we'll go with the first one.
Yeah.
Is it possible to create alerts, events based on resource graph changes?
I think it's possible. I haven't tried it myself, but I just didn't have a time for it. But someone asked me that before, so it kind of makes sense to include that in some advanced or a sequel to Azure Resource Graph, because there are some other things that we can do with it as well. I kind of focused here more on how to run the things conveniently in a kind of a nice way with a little bit of a task for a Visual Studio Code or some argument completers. But there are some other things that we can do as well with this. So I'm pretty sure it's possible to create alerts and events on it. I've seen someone running the resource graph queries from the Azure function, for example. So there are some different ways to run them and use them, really. One of the biggest advantage, really, I think, is it's super fast. Just amazingly fast, and it gives you access to all the subscriptions that you have access to with your account. So you can go through multiple subscriptions if you want, fetch all the data, compare them. Like super useful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, so far he just posted one, so I don't know.
Okay. So
we'll see if Matthias, if you have more, then post them.
Yeah, I presented a couple of times about Resource Graph, and I'm really happy how it works and how they are improving it. The documentation is also extremely very well written. I always go back after 1 month to see the changes. They're adding new stuff there all the time. And once when the module for PowerShell and extension for Azure CLI is a GA, it will be even more improved. Recently, they did something that it's really nice. They added parameter called include. So when you say -include display name, then it will add the display name for your subscription and your tenant to all your results. So if you have results from multiple subscriptions, it will be easier for you to do some grouping. So that's really super handy in Azure CLI and Azure PowerShell. If you use REST, then you need to take care of those things by yourself.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's see, Matthias posted again. So he's writing, I'm creating a program where I will be utilizing the resource graph. In this case, would the approach to code the queries into the program or utilize the shared queries so it wouldn't be hard-coded?
So I would suggest to use the shared queries, because when you create a shared query, it exists as a resource manager resource type, resource. So you can have access to that outside of your program as well. If you put your code inside of your program, it will be kind of a hard-coded. As you said, it will be only there, so you cannot leverage it in other ways. As you can see, when you have a shared query, then it's quite useful to use it from a portal or from a command line with a little bit of effort. As they have this experimental feature for Azure CLI, I'm pretty sure they will add the same kind of capabilities to a search AZ graph in PowerShell as well, to work with the shared ones. In the meantime, I will share my code, so you will get my solution with the argument completers. It gives you access to all your shared queries, and you can easily run them from a command line. You don't need to go to a portal. One thing when you need to go to portal is when you need visualization, right? So as long as you are happy just with the raw results, command line is great. Once when you want to visualize that, to pin it to a dashboard, then just use them in a portal, pin your results there, add and build, customize your dashboard as you like it.
Yep. Well, I can see this being useful for doing a kind of an inventory of the services that you actually have running.
Absolutely.
I'm curious if you've seen any use cases in the wild or how people are using it.
There is one thing that I recently discovered that I need to investigate a little bit more. Someone created a module that can build Azure policy based on your resource graph.
Okay.
So Azure Resource Graph is part of a governance, right? And when you apply certain policies to deny creation of a certain resource types, wouldn't it be nice to quickly get the results? Do you still have them? Does your policy really work or not, right? So then that connection between the Azure policy and the resource graph is there. We just need to kind of build a couple of things there because it's not, as far as I know, it's not supported directly by Microsoft with some commandlets or something. But I found on a GitHub one of the projects by someone who created commandlets for converting resource graph to policy, and then defining deny or just for auditing purposes. So that's very interesting use case that I would like to invest a little bit more time into to see how that works.
Yeah.
But in general, for example,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so for example, to me, the resource graph helped to find some of the unassigned resources that just ate my money in my credit.
Yeah.
I have one disk, pretty big one, with the premium storage that was unassigned. No, in some of my work, I deleted the VM, but that disk stayed, and I paid for it for a couple of months without even knowing it. With the resource graph, with the 3 lines of code, bam, immediately I found it and deleted it. The same thing is for IP addresses. The same thing is for unused NSG rules. There are so many things that can kind of be abandoned and orphaned, and without resource graph, it will be super hard to find them. Or if it's not very hard, then it will be very time consuming. The thing here is that the resource graph is based on a database, and that database, every time when things are changing in a resource manager sends information about updates to the database, and also on some regular, but I don't know how often the resource graph actually do the full scan of the changes and updates the database. So the state in database is kind of quite current. I recently did some change and tried to use this REST API approach to get it, and it's not something that works immediately. You need to be aware of that, right? So if you change something, resource graph will not fetch that change in the next couple of seconds. You need to give it some time to get the update.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
But still, it's very quick.
Cool. So there was one last question from Matthias.
Okay.
What he writes: what's the difference between this Azure Resource Graph and Microsoft Graph? Microsoft seems to prefer the Microsoft Graph.
Yeah. So Microsoft Graph is there to give us access to all the Microsoft 365 resources and Azure Active Directory. right? So if you work with the teams, then you will use Microsoft Graph to interact with it. If you work with the SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, you can use Microsoft Graph. Azure Resource Graph is specific only to Azure resources. And not everything is exposed with Azure Resource Graph. You need to be aware of that, right? So it depends on the APIs. Sometimes people like to get really deep into storage, for example. They would like to use Azure Resource Graph to get information about storage blobs. But you cannot get a lot. You can get, I think, like private access or something like that, but you cannot get information about how many data is stored there, because they need to improve the API and then it will be possible. Or certain resources are just not available because the tables that contain them are still not in Azure Resource Graph. They started with the 4 tables, now we have already 7.
Yeah.
Right. So they are improving it constantly. Right. But to get back to a question, Azure Resource Graph is for Azure specific resources, Microsoft Graph for practically everything else, right? Microsoft 365, all the identity part of a story, right?
Yeah.
And Microsoft Graph also has a huge set of modules. They're still in beta. They released 091 2 or 3 days ago. And I expect a lot from that. So we will have like a huge set of Azure-based, Azure-related modules with the Azure PowerShell. And then we will have an even bigger set of commandlets and modules with Microsoft Graph. Both of them right now are auto-generated, which means that they need a little bit of tweaking, but Azure is much more mature and kind of a pretty good right now after some problems they had in the past. Microsoft Graph is still waiting for the GA, so we will see.
Yeah. All right. I think that's all of it. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you very much for
I look
being
forward to seeing.
patient with me.
Yeah, of course, no problem.
Yeah.
Technical issues happen every once in a while.
Yeah, I mean,
Too bad it happened twice.
I was kind of afraid that something can happen because I had some issues, but then I updated everything that was possible, firmware, all the Windows updates and everything, and then put it in test for 2 days. It worked 2 days without any problems, and then bam, 2 blue screens during the presentation. If I didn't schedule the updates for Sunday, the first blue screen restart of the blue screen will be really fast. So I learned a lesson. Never ever schedule update before your presentations.
No, just upgrade it, or just buy a new laptop.
Oh, not the right time now.
No. All right, but appreciate you taking the time to connect with us here online and
always
share
Always
Azure Resource Graph. Yeah, and I look forward to seeing those examples. That looks very valuable. It looks like you put a lot of time and effort into creating it. So pick up for doing that. I mean, that's awesome to see.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. And we'll end the broadcast here. So thank you everyone for watching, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you, guys. See you. Bye.